Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Racing Pigeons with John Hunt. Hope you've had a great weekend, nice and relaxed, family time, and getting some work done at the pigeons. So today's video I'm going to talk about treatments, when I treat my pigeons, why I treat my pigeons, and what I treat them with, to regards to keeping them healthy. So I'll start with the stock pigeons. We only ever took 3 rounds out the stock pigeons, and one of them rounds got floated. So the first round, obviously, we paid the stock pigeons up early, because we're always sold around, which paid for the pigeons keep, because as we all know, it can be really expensive with club fees, etc, etc. So that way the pigeons paid for themselves for training and things like that. But that's another story. So the treatments, once the season had finished, we treat the whole loft. Say the season finishes in September, so the start of October we treat the whole loft, every pigeon in the loft, for 3 days for canker, just as a precautionary measure in the off season. I know the pigeons aren't doing a lot and there's not a lot of stress on them. However, we're always maintained for 3 days at the start every month in the off season, which is normally October, November, and then the stock pigeons would look at be getting paid up December. So how we treat the stock pigeons: before the stock pigeons were paid, we'd always treat with a broad spectrum antibiotic for 10 days prior to pairing. When you've got antibiotics in, you've got to take the grit and minerals out the loft. I'm not quite sure of the reason why, but I'll get back to you on that one. But there is a reason why. I'm sure it's something to do with calcium. However, I could be wrong. But always take the grit and minerals out while you're treating the pigeons. And we've done that for 10 days. But you always have to make sure you're 10 days clear of using it, in case empty eggs, because it can cause empty eggs if you use it when the pigeons say are ready to lay, or the pegging, or things like that. So we'll always make sure we're 10 days clear before we paid the stock pigeons up. Now, once the stock pigeons were sitting, we'd treat them for canker before the young birds hatched. Once the young birds had hatched, which obviously there was nothing then put in the water, because they're feeding the youngsters. So until the youngsters left, they'd get nothing in the water, and then they wouldn't get nothing in the water until they were sitting eggs again, and then we'd treat for canker again. So the method behind it was we basically treat for canker every time the stock pigeons were sitting, which is normally 3 rounds, but 1 got floated. So that was as much as we'd done with the stock pigeons. We didn't overdo it with them or anything like that. They got treated once a year to make sure they were clear, ready for pairing up, and then they got treated for canker every time they were sat, as a prevention rather than a cure. Never ever in the whole time I raised pigeons did I ever treat for coxy. Now, people will say you're treating blind. Yes, maybe we did, but we're also sent away at the vets once every month. When they were vet in Holland, that we used to send where we kit away to, and we used to get results off him, and not once did we have any problems. The odd time maybe we had something little that was easy put right, but we never had no major problems. We're helpful with pigeons, treating them like that. Moving on to the race team now. So the race team would be exactly the same. They would have got tret for 3 days. They start every month in the off season as a precautionary measure. They would never obviously be getting out the loft, so they'd just be sat in the loft, but it was a precautionary measure that they got done for canker. Now, once the pigeons had paid and was sitting, the race team, prior to that as well, would do the same with the race team as we're done with the stock pigeons. They'd get tret for 10 days prior to pairing. This was more of a precautionary measure than a cure. And then once they were sitting eggs, they would treat them for canker once they were sitting eggs. So the race team, it would be more or less exactly the same as the stock birds. The grit and minerals would come out as well while they were rearing young birds. So up to now we've got where we paired them, they've sitting, we treat for canker every time. Before we pair them, we treat with a broad spectrum antibiotic for 10 days to make sure they're all clear, ready to pair. And that was a loft SOP, standard procedure, if you like, that would do that all the time. Now, once the race team, because we always took the hens out, like I says in my cocks video, and the cocks finished rearing the young birds. Once we took them hens out, we'd treat the race team for canker again for 3 days. And then once we put the pigeons back together, the race team, because we always made them sit a second round of eggs. I know a lot of people disagree with it, but we always done it and we never had no problems. That's when we treat for respiratory prior to them pairing for the second time, and we treat for 10 days with Soludox, which is doxycycline, normally about 20-30% at the very most. I mean, you can get it, I know you can get it 100% from Holland and Belgium, but the most we ever done was 20-30%, and then that was them prepared health-wise for the season, so they were cankered, tret for respiratory, and we always use nystatin on the corn for yeast every Wednesday, and that was with treatments for the race team prior to racing. Now, once the pigeons were racing, I'd go down the loft every Sunday morning before first light, take all the feed out the loft, and just as it become first light, go in and give every pigeon a flangle tablet or half a flangle, depending on the strength of them. I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm not quite sure, but I think you know what I mean. And the reason I've done this in at that time is because excuse me, if you let the pigeons have something to eat and then go and give them the flangle, they'll just spew all over and you defeat an object. So I always went down first light, took the feed out, especially because of the way I fed, and that's what I'd done for canker, and I'd done that 1 week. The week after, I'd treat for respiratory, and I'd treat Sunday, Monday and Tuesday AM. Tuesday PM I'd give a probiotic, and Saturday PM they'd get a prebiotic, which is the same thing, pre and probiotic, and fresh water obviously when they had come back from the race. So that's the way I had tret. my old birds, I always try to change the respiratory treatment from one type to the next. So I always did have 2 or 3 different types of respiratory treatment, and I used to change it so the pigeons didn't build a tolerance up maybe to the one I was using. That was my theory, and it seemed to work, because like I say, we never had no problems during the season with no fungal or nothing like that. We try to cover everything as a preventative rather than a cure, because I think if you get in the middle of the season and then suddenly you've got a massive problem with yeast, or I don't know, that's just for example, before you know it, the season's over before you can get your pigeons right, and you've waited all year for what? So I'm not saying it's right. I know a lot of people don't treat blind, but what I will say is, well, we're always got the pigeons tested once a month in the racing season. Even though we treat the way we did, we always got them tested once a month, and they'd always come back clear. We never ever, very, very rare, it come back with anything. And if it was something, it would, I can't even remember what it was, to be honest, but it was very, very rare. So well, pigeons were always healthy, and I think that's how we managed to compete with some of the best flyers in up North Combine in the Federation were flying in. I'm just looking if there's anything I've missed. Oh yeah, holdovers. Now after a holdover, you know yourself, you go lock yourself in a room with another 20 men who's full of flu, and you're there for 2 days, you're coming out with the flu. It's a guarantee. So that was the theory I looked at with holdovers. So after a holdover, I always treat with lingo spectrum or the like instead of respiratory that week, and that was for the simple reason, for the holdover, I had been in a basket with other pigeons that you don't know were healthy, and like again, I say it was a preventative rather than all that, especially after a holdover. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I can't remember exactly what treatments we treat with. I used to have them all wrote down, but I haven't got them now. But I know lingo spectrum was a big one we used, and doxycycline and canker flangle, but we also had soluble canker powder as well, which you can get freely on the internet or anywhere like that, and that's decent stuff as well. So that rounds it up for this video for treatments, how I treat and when I treat. If I've missed anything or confused anyone, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll answer the comments. Please feel free to subscribe, it's free and it's my motivation for the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and the next one will be the Will Hood Cox part 2. Thank you.